Sometimes the greatest victories come disguised as the deepest humiliations. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks becomes the one who changes everything. This is the true story of Sarah Chen, a quiet girl who endured a decade of mockery in the small town of Millfield, only to return as someone nobody expected, arriving not in a luxury car or designer clothes, but in an Apache helicopter that would land in the high school parking lot and forever change how her former classmates saw success, strength, and the girl they thought they knew. What happened in that gymnasium on a Tuesday afternoon in October would become the most talked about moment in Millfield's history. But, to understand the magnitude of that moment, you need to know where it all began, with a scared 12-year-old girl walking into Jefferson Middle School, carrying secrets that would take her places no one in that small town could ever imagine. This is her story. Sarah Chen stood outside Jefferson Middle School on her first day, clutching a worn backpack that contained everything she owned. The September morning was crisp, and she could see her breath forming small clouds in the cool air. At 12 years old, she was smaller than most kids her age, with straight black hair that she kept pulled back in a simple ponytail and clothes from the local thrift store that never quite fit right. The school building loomed in front of her like a fortress. Through the large windows, she could see other students laughing and talking with their friends. They all seemed to belong here in a way that Sarah knew she never would. This was her 5th school in 3 years. Her grandmother, who had raised her since her parents died in a car accident when she was 7, worked multiple jobs just to keep them afloat. They moved whenever the rent got too high or when her grandmother found work in another town. As Sarah walked through the front doors, she immediately felt the stares. Millfield was the kind of small town where everyone knew everyone, and new faces stood out like neon signs. The hallway smelled like cleaning supplies and teenage anxiety. Students filled the corridors, their voices echoing off the lockers as they reunited after summer break. Sarah found her homeroom and quietly took a seat in the back corner. She had learned that corners were safe places. They let you see everything while keeping your back protected. The teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, seemed kind enough when she introduced Sarah to the class, but Sarah could feel 28 pairs of eyes studying her like she was some sort of exotic animal. During lunch, Sarah sat alone in the cafeteria with a peanut butter sandwich she had made at home. The cafeteria food cost money they didn't have, so she brought her lunch every day. Around her, groups of students laughed and shared stories about their summers. Sarah listened to their conversations about family vacations, new clothes, and the latest video games. It was like hearing about life on another planet. "Look at the new girl," she heard someone whisper. "Her clothes are so weird." Sarah glanced down at her jeans, which were too long and had been hemmed with safety pins. Her shirt was clean but faded from too many washings. She tried to make herself smaller, hoping to become invisible. The whispering continued throughout the week. At first, it was just curious observations. Where did she come from? Why was she so quiet? But curiosity quickly turned into something meaner. Kids noticed that her lunch was always the same. They saw that she never had money for the school book fare or field trip fees. They observed that she walked to school instead of being dropped off by parents in nice cars. By the end of the first month, the comments had become more direct. Jessica Manning, who seemed to be the unofficial leader of the 7th grade, made it her mission to point out everything different about Sarah. During science class, when Sarah couldn't afford to buy the required lab notebook, Jessica loudly announced to everyone that Sarah was too poor to buy school supplies. "Maybe she should ask her parents for money," Jessica said with a smirk, not knowing that Sarah's parents were dead. Sarah's face burned with embarrassment, but she said nothing. She had learned early in life that fighting back only made things worse. Instead, she focused on her studies. School was the one place where her circumstances didn't matter as much. Her brain worked just as well as anyone else's, regardless of what clothes she wore. The pattern continued into 8th grade. Sarah excelled in all her classes, but her academic success only seemed to make some students resent her more. "Of course she gets good grades," Marcus Thompson would say. "She has nothing better to do. No friends, no social life, just books." The comments cut deep, but Sarah developed thick skin. She found refuge in the school library, where Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, treated her with kindness and respect. Mrs. Patterson noticed Sarah's love of learning and began recommending books that challenged her mind and expanded her world. Through those books, Sarah traveled to distant places and learned about people who had overcome incredible odds. During high school, the social hierarchy became even more rigid. Sarah remained an outsider, but she had carved out her own space. She joined the academic decathlon team, where her knowledge and quick thinking were actually valued. She volunteered at the local animal shelter, where she found the companionship she couldn't find at school. Most importantly, she began to dream about her future. Sarah discovered that she had a natural aptitude for languages and international relations. She spent hours in the library reading about different cultures and global politics. Her English teacher, Mr. Davidson, noticed her interests and encouraged her to apply for a scholarship to attend a summer program for gifted students interested in government service. The scholarship application required essays about leadership and service. Sarah wrote about her experiences volunteering at the animal shelter and helping her grandmother navigate bureaucratic paperwork for her various jobs. She wrote about wanting to make a difference in the world, to help people who felt powerless the way she had felt powerless. When the acceptance letter arrived, Sarah could hardly believe it. She had been selected for a full scholarship to attend a 6-week program in Washington, D.C., that summer. The program was designed to introduce exceptional high school students to careers in government service, including opportunities in the military, foreign service, and intelligence agencies. Her grandmother cried when Sarah showed her the letter. "I always knew you were destined for something special," she said, holding Sarah tight. "Your parents would be so proud." Sarah tried to keep the news quiet at school, but somehow word got out. The reaction was mixed. Some teachers were genuinely excited for her opportunity. But many of her classmates seemed resentful that the weird poor girl had achieved something they hadn't. "It's probably just a pity scholarship," Jessica Manning said during lunch. "They probably felt sorry for her." Marcus Thompson added his own commentary. "What's she going to do in Washington? Nobody there is going to care about some small-town nobody." Their words stung, but Sarah was beginning to understand something important about herself. She realized that their mockery said more about them than it did about her. They were trapped in their small-town thinking, unable to imagine that someone they looked down on could achieve something extraordinary. The summer program in Washington changed Sarah's life in ways she couldn't have imagined. For 6 weeks, she lived in a dormitory with other exceptional students from around the country. For the first time in her life, she was surrounded by people who valued intelligence and curiosity over social status and family wealth. The program exposed her to various career paths in government service. She attended briefings at the State Department, visited military installations, and met with intelligence officials. Each experience opened her mind to new possibilities. But it was during a presentation by a military recruiter that Sarah found her true calling. The recruiter, a woman named Colonel Martinez, talked about opportunities for women in military service. She spoke about leadership, about serving something greater than yourself, and about the military's commitment to education and training. Colonel Martinez mentioned that the military actively recruited people with language skills and international awareness for specialized roles. After the presentation, Sarah approached Colonel Martinez with questions. The colonel was impressed by Sarah's thoughtfulness and her genuine interest in service. They talked for over an hour about different military career paths and the opportunities available for someone with Sarah's academic abilities. "Have you ever considered military intelligence?" Colonel Martinez asked. "We're always looking for bright people with your language aptitude and cultural awareness. The training is intense, but the opportunities are incredible." That conversation planted a seed in Sarah's mind that would grow throughout her senior year. She began researching military careers in earnest, learning about the various branches and specialties. She was particularly drawn to opportunities that would allow her to use her language skills and international knowledge. When Sarah returned to Millfield for her senior year, she felt different. The summer in Washington had shown her that there was a whole world beyond her small town, a world where she could not only fit in but excel. She walked through the halls of Jefferson High with more confidence, even as the same students continued their petty comments. "Look who's back," Jessica said on the first day of school. Did you have fun playing pretend with all the important people? But Sarah's response surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of looking down and hurrying away, she met Jessica's gaze directly. Actually, I did, Sarah said calmly. I learned a lot about opportunities one never knew existed. The confidence in her voice caught Jessica off guard. For a moment, the hallway was quiet. Then, Marcus Thompson laughed loudly. Opportunities? Like what? You still live in that tiny apartment with your grandmother. Nothing's changed. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. You're right. Nothing has changed yet. But it will. Throughout her senior year, Sarah focused on her studies and her future plans. She met regularly with her guidance counselor, Mrs. Kim, to discuss college and military opportunities. Mrs. Kim was one of the few adults at school who truly understood Sarah's potential. Have you given more thought to your post-graduation plans? Mrs. Kim asked during one of their meetings. Sarah nodded. I've been researching military intelligence careers. I think it might be the right path for me. Mrs. Kim was supportive but wanted to make sure Sarah was making an informed decision. Military service is a big commitment. Have you talked to any current service members about what it's really like? That conversation led Sarah to reach out to Colonel Martinez, who connected her with several current and former military intelligence officers. Through phone calls and emails, Sarah learned about the realities of military life, both the challenges and the rewards. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that this was her path. As graduation approached, Sarah's classmates were focused on prom, senior trips, and college orientations. Sarah participated in the graduation ceremony, but her mind was already elsewhere. She had made her decision and was preparing to leave Millfield behind. The night before graduation, Sarah sat with her grandmother on their small apartment balcony, looking out at the town where she had spent the most difficult years of her life. Are you sure about this military decision? Her grandmother asked gently. You could go to college, maybe get a scholarship to a good university. Sarah took her grandmother's hand. I know it seems risky, but I feel like this is what I'm meant to do. The military will pay for my education, give me training I could never get anywhere else, and let me serve my country. Most importantly, it will take me places I never could have imagined. Her grandmother squeezed her hand. Your parents wanted you to have opportunities they never had. I think they would be proud of the woman you're becoming. Graduation day was bittersweet. Sarah walked across the stage to receive her diploma, graduating in the top 5% of her class despite everything she had endured. As she looked out at her classmates and their families, she felt a strange sense of closure. These people had shaped her in ways they would never understand. Their rejection had made her stronger, their mockery had motivated her to prove them wrong, and their small-town limitations had inspired her to dream bigger. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and celebrations, Sarah quietly slipped away. She had no extended family to celebrate with, and her grandmother had to work that evening. As she walked home alone in her cap and gown, Sarah felt a sense of anticipation rather than sadness. This wasn't an ending, it was the beginning of everything she had been working toward. That night, Sarah looked at herself in the mirror of her small bedroom. The girl staring back at her was different from the frightened 12-year-old who had walked into Jefferson Middle School 6 years earlier. Her eyes held determination instead of fear, confidence instead of shame. In just a few weeks, she would leave Millfield to begin basic training. She would trade her thrift store clothes for a military uniform, her small bedroom for a barracks, and her status as an outcast for the honor of serving her country. Most importantly, she would begin the journey that would eventually bring her back to Millfield in ways that no one could predict. As Sarah fell asleep that night, she had no idea that 10 years later, she would return to her high school gymnasium in an Apache helicopter, wearing the uniform of a military intelligence officer, to deliver a speech that would forever change how her former classmates understood success, service, and the power of never giving up on your dreams. The bus pulled away from the Millfield station at dawn on a humid July morning, carrying Sarah toward her new life. As familiar buildings and streets disappeared behind her, she pressed her forehead against the cool window glass and watched her past fade into the distance. In her duffel bag were the few possessions she owned, a letter from her grandmother, and the acceptance packet for Army basic combat training at Fort Moore, Georgia. The journey to Georgia gave Sarah time to think about the magnitude of her decision. She was 18 years old, completely alone, and about to enter a world she knew only from research and conversations with recruiters. The other passengers on the bus looked like they had somewhere to return to after their travels. Sarah was heading toward the unknown with no safety net except her own determination. Fort Moore appeared through the bus window like something from another planet. The base was enormous, with buildings stretching as far as she could see. Military vehicles moved along the roads, and everywhere she looked, people in uniform walked with purpose and discipline. Sarah felt her stomach flutter with nervousness and excitement as she stepped off the bus with a handful of other new recruits. The first few hours were a blur of paperwork, medical exams, and shouted instructions. Drill sergeants moved the new recruits from station to station with military precision, their voices carrying commands that brooked no argument. Sarah found herself standing in line with young people from every corner of America, farm kids from Iowa, city dwellers from Los Angeles, and everything in between. "Chen, Sarah." A drill sergeant's voice cut through the chaos. "Here, drill sergeant." Sarah responded, snapping to attention as she had learned during her brief orientation. The drill sergeant, a woman whose nameplate read Williams, looked Sarah up and down with sharp eyes. "You look like you weigh about 90 pounds soaking wet, Chun. Think you can handle what we're about to put you through?" "Yes, drill sergeant." Sarah replied with more confidence than she felt. Drill Sergeant Williams nodded once. "We'll see." The first weeks of basic training were the hardest things Sarah had ever experienced. She was pushed beyond every physical and mental limit she thought she had. The wake-up call came at 0500 hours every morning, followed by physical training that left every muscle in her body screaming. The drill sergeants demanded perfection in everything from making beds to marching in formation. Sarah struggled with the physical demands more than many of her fellow recruits. She had never been athletic, and her small frame made some exercises particularly challenging. During obstacle courses, she had to find creative ways to overcome barriers that taller, stronger recruits could simply power through. But what Sarah lacked in physical strength, she made up for in determination and intelligence. When other recruits were struggling with map reading and navigation exercises, Sarah excelled. Her years of academic focus had taught her how to learn quickly and retain complex information. She became the person others turned to for help with written tests and tactical problems. "Chen's like a walking computer," Private Rodriguez said one evening as they cleaned their weapons in the barracks. "She remembers everything the instructors tell us." Private Martinez nodded in agreement. "And she never gets flustered. Even when Drill Sergeant Williams is screaming in her face, she stays calm and focused." Sarah appreciated her fellow recruits' recognition, but she knew that respect in the military had to be earned through more than just book smarts. She threw herself into every challenge, determined to prove that her commitment was as strong as anyone's. The turning point came during a field exercise in week 6. The recruits were tasked with a night navigation course that required them to move through dense woods using only a compass and map. Many of the stronger, more athletic recruits became disoriented in the darkness and thick vegetation. Sarah's team was struggling to find their checkpoint when she noticed something the others had missed. Using her small flashlight, she studied the terrain and compared it to the topographic lines on their map. "We're not lost," she told her teammates quietly. "We're about 200 meters north of where we think we are. See that ridgeline? It matches this elevation marker on the map." Following Sarah's guidance, the team successfully navigated to their checkpoint and completed the exercise faster than any other group. When they returned to base, their drill sergeant was waiting with an expression that might have been approval. "Outstanding work, Team 3, Drill Sergeant Williams announced to the assembled recruits. They completed the course in record time because they used their brains instead of just trying to muscle through it." After the exercise, Private Jackson, one of the strongest and most naturally athletic recruits, approached Sarah privately. "I owe you an apology, Chen," he said. When we started this, I thought you wouldn't make it past the first week. I was wrong. You've got something the rest of us are still learning. What's that? Sarah asked. You think before you act. You solve problems instead of just trying to overpower them. That's going to make you a hell of a soldier. As basic training continued, Sarah's reputation grew. She became known as someone who could find solutions when others saw only obstacles. Her calm demeanor under pressure and her ability to absorb and apply new information quickly caught the attention of her instructors. During week 8, Drill Sergeant Williams called Sarah into her office for a private conversation. Sit down, Chen, the drill sergeant said, her tone less harsh than usual. Your test scores and performance evaluations have caught some attention. Your ASVAB scores qualify you for some of the most specialized positions in the Army. Sarah sat at attention, unsure what was coming next. Have you given any thought to what specialty you want to pursue after basic training? Drill Sergeant Williams asked. I'm interested in military intelligence, Drill Sergeant. I've done some research on the career field, and I think my language skills and academic background would be useful. Drill Sergeant Williams nodded. Intelligence is a good fit for someone with your abilities. But there are different levels of intelligence work. Some of it is routine analysis and paperwork. Some of it involves specialized training that most people can't handle. She leaned forward slightly. There are opportunities for exceptional recruits to pursue advanced training in specialized units. These positions require security clearances, intensive education, and a level of commitment that goes beyond normal military service. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. What kind of opportunities? I can't give you details here, but if you're interested, I can arrange for you to speak with some representatives after you complete basic training. Just understand that once you start down that path, there's no going back to a normal military career. Sarah didn't hesitate. I'm interested, Drill Sergeant. The final weeks of basic training flew by. Sarah continued to excel in all areas, and, by graduation, she had earned the respect of her drill sergeants and fellow recruits. During the graduation ceremony, as she stood in formation wearing her dress uniform for the first time, Sarah felt a profound sense of transformation. The frightened, mocked girl from Millfield was gone. In her place stood a soldier who had proven herself capable of meeting any challenge. The uniform represented more than just military service, it represented her complete rebirth as someone who belonged, someone with value, someone with a mission. After basic training, Sarah was assigned to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, for advanced individual training in military intelligence. The base, located in the high desert near the Mexican border, was home to the Army's intelligence school and some of its most classified operations. The intelligence training was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. While basic training had challenged her physically and mentally, intelligence school challenged her intellectually in ways that reminded her why she had always loved learning. She studied subjects ranging from foreign languages to geopolitical analysis to advanced computer systems. Her instructors quickly recognized her exceptional abilities. Captain Morrison, who taught advanced language analysis, was particularly impressed with Sarah's progress. Chen, you have a natural aptitude for linguistic patterns that I rarely see, he told her after a particularly complex lesson on Middle Eastern dialects. Have you considered specializing in cryptologic operations? Sarah was intrigued. What would that involve, sir? Signals intelligence. Electronic surveillance. Code breaking. It's some of the most classified work the military does, and it requires people with your specific skill set. As Sarah progressed through her intelligence training, she began to understand the vast scope of modern military operations. The Army was involved in activities around the world that required sophisticated intelligence gathering and analysis. The work was complex, important, and exactly the kind of challenge she had been seeking. Midway through her training, Sarah received an unexpected opportunity. She was approached by a representative from a special operations unit that recruited personnel for highly classified missions. The representative, a woman whose business card identified her only as Ms. Stevens, met with Sarah in a secure conference room. Your instructors have recommended you for some very specialized training opportunities, Ms. Stevens said. The work would involve extended deployments, intensive education in foreign languages and cultures, and assignments that most people never know exist. Sarah listened intently as Ms. Stevens outlined opportunities that sounded like something from a spy novel. The unit recruited military personnel for intelligence operations that required deep cultural knowledge and language expertise. The training would take years and would prepare her for assignments in some of the most challenging locations in the world. The commitment is significant, Ms. Stevens explained. We're talking about a minimum of 8 years of active duty, with the possibility of much longer. The training is intensive, and the work can be dangerous. But the experience and education you would receive are unlike anything available in civilian life. Sarah thought about her grandmother, who was getting older and might need her help. She thought about the normal life she could have if she chose a standard military career. But she also thought about the girl who had sat alone in the cafeteria, dreaming of a life that mattered. I'm interested, Sarah said without hesitation. The next phase of Sarah's military career began with language training at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. The DLI was famous for its intensive language programs that could take a person from zero knowledge to professional proficiency in less than 2 years. Sarah was assigned to study Arabic, with a focus on the dialects spoken in the Middle East and North Africa. The program was notoriously difficult, with a failure rate of over 50%. Students attended classes for 6 to 8 hours a day, then spent additional hours studying and practicing with native speakers. For Sarah, the language training was exactly what she had been hoping for. She threw herself into Arabic with the same determination she had brought to everything else in her military career. Her instructors were impressed not just with her ability to memorize vocabulary and grammar rules, but with her intuitive understanding of how language and culture intersected. Chen has an exceptional ear for subtle linguistic variations, her instructor, Dr. Al-Hassan, noted in her evaluation. She doesn't just learn Arabic, she understands how Arabic speakers think and express themselves. While at DLI, Sarah also began more advanced training in intelligence analysis and cultural studies. She learned to read complex geopolitical situations, understand the motivations of different actors in international conflicts, and analyze intelligence from multiple sources. The training was mentally exhausting but intellectually thrilling. For the first time in her life, Sarah was surrounded by people who shared her passion for learning and understanding the world. Her fellow students came from various military branches and backgrounds, but they all shared a commitment to excellence and service. During her second year at DLI, Sarah received news that changed everything. Her grandmother had suffered a heart attack and was in the hospital in Millfield. Sarah was granted emergency leave to return home for the first time since joining the Army. Walking into Millfield General Hospital wearing her military uniform, Sarah felt like she was visiting another planet. The town looked exactly the same, but she had changed so completely that everything felt foreign. When she reached her grandmother's room, the older woman's eyes filled with tears. "Look at you," her grandmother whispered, reaching out to touch Sarah's uniform. "You look so strong, so confident. I hardly recognize you." Sarah spent a week in Millfield while her grandmother recovered. During that time, she inevitably encountered some of her former classmates. The reactions were varied and telling. Some, like Marcus Thompson, who was working at his father's auto repair shop, seemed genuinely surprised by her transformation. "Sarah Chen? Is that really you?" Marcus said when he saw her at the grocery store. "You look different." Sarah smiled politely. "Military training will do that." Marcus looked uncomfortable, perhaps remembering some of the cruel things he had said during high school. "So you actually joined the Army? I thought that was just talk." "It wasn't talk," Sarah replied simply. Others, like Jessica Manning, who had married her high school boyfriend and was working as a receptionist, seemed less impressed by Sarah's transformation. "Still trying to act like you're special, I see," Jessica said when they crossed paths at the post office. "Playing soldier doesn't change where you came from." Sarah looked at Jessica for a long moment, taking in her faded appearance and bitter expression. "You're right," Sarah said quietly. It doesn't change where I came from. But it has definitely changed where I'm going. As Sarah prepared to return to California, her grandmother pulled her aside for a private conversation. I want you to know how proud I am of you, her grandmother said. But I also want you to promise me something. Anything, Sarah replied. Promise me you won't let the people in this town define you, either positively or negatively. You're not trying to prove anything to them anymore. You're building something entirely your own. Her grandmother's words stayed with Sarah as she completed her language training and moved on to even more specialized instruction. Over the next 3 years, she completed advanced courses in intelligence analysis, tactical operations, and cultural immersion. She learned to blend into different societies, understand complex political situations, and gather intelligence in ways that required both intellectual sophistication and personal courage. By her 5th year in the Army, Sarah had become exactly the kind of soldier the military most valued: highly educated, culturally aware, and completely reliable. She had earned multiple commendations and had been promoted ahead of her peers. But, more importantly, she had found her true calling in service that combined her intellectual gifts with meaningful work. As she prepared for her first major overseas deployment, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from the cafeteria of Jefferson Middle School to the elite ranks of military intelligence. The girl who had once felt powerless was now entrusted with missions that could affect national security. The Outcast had become indispensable. The C-130 transport plane descended through thick clouds toward Bugram Airfield in Afghanistan. Sarah pressed her face to the small window, watching the stark mountains and desert landscape emerge below. After 5 years of training and preparation, she was finally heading to her first combat deployment as a military intelligence officer specializing in human intelligence operations. The deployment briefing had been classified, but Sarah understood the basic mission. She would be working with a joint task force focused on gathering intelligence about insurgent networks operating along the Pakistan border. Her language skills, cultural training, and analytical abilities would be put to the test in ways that no classroom could simulate. Captain Sarah Chen, she had been promoted twice since completing her advanced training, stepped off the plane into the thin, dusty air of Afghanistan. The base was a sprawling complex of concrete barriers, prefabricated buildings, and constant activity. Helicopters thundered overhead, convoys of armored vehicles moved along the perimeter roads, and everywhere she looked, military personnel from different nations worked alongside each other. Sarah's commanding officer, Major Patricia Sullivan, met her at the Arrival Processing Center. Major Sullivan was a veteran intelligence officer with multiple deployments under her belt, and she had specifically requested Sarah for her team based on her training record and language capabilities. "Welcome to the real world, Captain Chen," Major Sullivan said as they walked toward the intelligence compound. "Everything you learned in training is about to be tested against an enemy that doesn't follow textbook patterns." The first few weeks were an intensive orientation to combat operations. Sarah learned how intelligence gathering worked in an active war zone, where the information collected could mean the difference between mission success and casualties. She studied the local tribal structures, political dynamics, and economic factors that influenced the insurgency. Sarah's first assignment involved analyzing intercepted communications from suspected insurgent cells. Using her Arabic language skills, she worked to decrypt coded messages and identify patterns that might reveal planned attacks or supply routes. The work was painstaking and required attention to detail that reminded her of the academic rigor she had always enjoyed. But her real breakthrough came during her 3rd month in Afghanistan. The intelligence team had been trying to penetrate a particularly sophisticated insurgent network that seemed to anticipate their operations. Traditional surveillance methods weren't working, and the unit needed a different approach. Sarah proposed a strategy that combined cultural analysis with technological intelligence gathering. She had noticed that the insurgent communications often included references to local cultural events and traditional gatherings. By mapping these references against tribal calendar cycles and religious observances, she believed they could predict when and where the insurgents would meet. "It's brilliant," Major Sullivan said after reviewing Sarah's analysis. "They're hiding their operational planning inside cultural communications that most intelligence analysts would dismiss as background noise." Sarah's approach proved successful beyond anyone's expectations. Over the following months, her team was able to disrupt multiple insurgent operations and gather intelligence that led to the capture of several high-value targets. Her work earned her a Bronze Star Medal and recognition throughout the intelligence community. More importantly, Sarah had proven that her unique combination of analytical intelligence and cultural sensitivity made her exceptionally valuable in complex operational environments. Word of her success reached higher levels of command, and she began receiving requests for assignments that were increasingly specialized and classified. After completing her Afghanistan deployment, Sarah was assigned to the Pentagon for a year-long fellowship in strategic intelligence analysis. Working in the heart of the Defense Department, she was exposed to intelligence operations at the highest levels of government. She participated in briefings for senior military leaders and contributed to assessments that influenced national security policy. The Pentagon assignment was intellectually stimulating but also eye-opening about the scope of global military operations. Sarah worked on analysis related to situations around the world, from cyber warfare threats to international terrorism to traditional military conflicts. She began to understand how the intelligence work she had done in Afghanistan fit into a much larger picture of national defense. During her fellowship, Sarah also continued her education, completing a master's degree in international relations through a military education program. Her thesis focused on the intersection of cultural intelligence and counterinsurgency operations, drawing on her experiences in Afghanistan to propose new approaches to intelligence gathering in complex cultural environments. The combination of her combat experience, advanced education, and proven analytical abilities made Sarah a rising star within the military intelligence community. By her 7th year of service, she had been promoted to major and was being considered for assignments that would put her at the forefront of some of the military's most sensitive operations. The opportunity that would define the next phase of Sarah's career came through a program she had never heard of until she was approached by a colonel from Special Operations Command. Colonel James Harrison met with Sarah in a secure conference room at the Pentagon, carrying a briefcase that he opened only after ensuring the room was completely secure. "Major Chen, your record shows exceptional performance in both analytical intelligence and field operations," Colonel Harrison began. "We have an opportunity that would make full use of your unique skill set, but it requires a commitment that goes beyond normal military service." Colonel Harrison outlined a program that sounded like something from a spy thriller. The military was developing new approaches to intelligence gathering that required personnel who could operate independently in foreign countries for extended periods. The work involved deep cover assignments where military intelligence officers would pose as civilians while gathering critical information about threats to national security. "The training is intensive and dangerous," Colonel Harrison explained. "You would spend 18 months learning advanced tradecraft, including surveillance techniques, covert communications, and deep cover identity management. After training, assignments typically last 2 to 3 years and involve working alone or with minimal support in hostile environments." Sarah listened intently, her mind racing with the implications of what she was being offered. This wasn't just military service, it was a complete commitment to a life of service that would require sacrificing normal relationships and experiences. "What kind of assignments are we talking about?" Sarah asked. "I can't give you specifics until you commit to the program," Colonel Harrison replied. "But imagine intelligence gathering operations in countries where traditional military presence is impossible. Think about situations where understanding local culture and speaking the language perfectly could prevent international conflicts or terrorist attacks." Sarah thought about her grandmother, who was now in her 70s and living alone in Millfield. She thought about the normal life she could have if she chose a different path. But she also thought about the unique combination of skills and experiences that had brought her to this moment. "How soon would I need to decide?" Sarah asked. "The next training cycle begins in 6 weeks, Colonel Harrison said. If you're interested, you'll need to undergo extensive psychological evaluation and security screening. Not everyone who applies is accepted, and not everyone who's accepted completes the training." That night, Sarah called her grandmother from her apartment near the Pentagon. They talked for over an hour about Sarah's career, her future plans, and the opportunities she was considering. "It sounds dangerous," her grandmother said finally. But it also sounds like exactly the kind of work you were meant to do. You've always been drawn to challenges that other people couldn't handle. 3 weeks later, Sarah received notification that she had been accepted into the program. The psychological evaluations had confirmed what her previous performance had demonstrated. She had the mental resilience and emotional stability required for the most demanding intelligence assignments. The advanced training took place at a classified facility that officially didn't exist. For 18 months, Sarah learned skills that transformed her from a military intelligence officer into something approaching a professional spy. She studied advanced surveillance and counter-surveillance techniques. She learned to create and maintain false identities that would withstand scrutiny. She practiced covert communication methods that allowed her to transmit intelligence while appearing to live a completely normal civilian life. The training was unlike anything she had experienced in her military career. The physical demands were intense, but the psychological pressure was even greater. Students were required to maintain cover identities for weeks at a time while being actively hunted by instructors who tried to break their stories. Many trainees couldn't handle the stress and dropped out of the program. Sarah not only survived the training but excelled at it. Her instructors noted that she had a natural ability to blend into different environments and assume different personas without losing sight of her mission objectives. Her language skills and cultural awareness made her particularly effective at creating believable cover stories and developing relationships with potential intelligence sources. Upon completing the program, Sarah was assigned to her first deep cover mission. She couldn't discuss the details with anyone, including her grandmother, but she would be spending the next 2 years living as a civilian in a foreign country while gathering intelligence about potential threats to American interests. Before leaving for her assignment, Sarah made one last trip to Millfield to visit her grandmother. It had been 3 years since her last visit, and she was shocked by how much the older woman had aged. Her grandmother was still sharp and independent, but she was clearly becoming frail. They spent a quiet week together, with Sarah helping around the house and listening to her grandmother's stories about the old days. On their last evening together, they sat on the small apartment balcony where they had talked before Sarah left for basic training nearly 9 years earlier. "I want you to know that I understand what you're doing," her grandmother said quietly. "I may not know the details, but I know you're serving something bigger than yourself. Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become." Sarah felt tears in her eyes for the first time in years. "I promise I'll come back," she said. "When this assignment is over, I'll come home." Her grandmother squeezed her hand. "I know you will. And, when you do, you'll have stories that will amaze me." Sarah's deep cover assignment took her to a country she couldn't name, where she spent 2 years living as a business consultant while gathering intelligence about international criminal networks that posed threats to American security. The work was lonely and dangerous, requiring her to maintain her false identity even while developing relationships with people who could provide valuable information. The experience tested every skill she had learned and pushed her emotional resilience to its limits. There were times when she felt completely alone, when the weight of maintaining her cover identity while carrying out her mission seemed almost unbearable. But she persevered, drawing strength from her memories of the girl who had sat alone in the Millfield cafeteria, determined never to feel powerless again. Sarah's mission was a complete success. The intelligence she gathered led to the disruption of several criminal networks and prevented what intelligence analysts believed could have been significant attacks on American interests. Her work earned her a commendation that she couldn't discuss with anyone outside the intelligence community. When she returned to the United States after her 2-year assignment, Sarah was promoted to lieutenant colonel and offered her choice of assignments within the intelligence community. She had proven herself capable of operating at the highest levels of military intelligence, and doors were open to her that most military personnel never knew existed. But Sarah chose an assignment that surprised many of her colleagues. Instead of accepting another overseas posting or a prestigious position at the Pentagon, she requested assignment as the intelligence officer for an aviation unit that was testing new helicopter-based surveillance technologies. The assignment would allow her to combine her intelligence background with training as a helicopter pilot, creating a unique skill set that the military was eager to develop. Sarah would learn to pilot various military aircraft while also serving as the intelligence officer responsible for planning and executing surveillance missions. The flight training was another challenge that Sarah embraced wholeheartedly. Learning to pilot military helicopters required physical skills, mental coordination, and split-second decision-making abilities that complemented her intelligence background perfectly. She discovered that flying gave her a sense of freedom and control that she had never experienced before. During her flight training, Sarah specialized in flying the AH-64 Apache helicopter, one of the most advanced and capable aircraft in the military inventory. The Apache was a sophisticated weapons platform that could operate in the most challenging environments, and piloting it required extensive training and exceptional skill. As Sarah mastered the Apache, she began to understand how her unique combination of skills, intelligence analysis, cultural awareness, language abilities, and now aviation expertise, made her valuable for missions that required both technical capability and sophisticated intelligence gathering. After completing her flight training and earning her wings, Sarah was assigned to a special operations unit that conducted classified missions around the world. Her role as an intelligence officer and Apache pilot put her at the forefront of operations that combined traditional military capabilities with advanced intelligence gathering techniques. The work was exactly what Sarah had been preparing for throughout her military career. She flew missions that required precise intelligence analysis, cultural sensitivity, and technical expertise. Her ability to gather and analyze intelligence while also serving as a pilot made her indispensable to her unit's success. As Sarah approached her 10th year of military service, she had achieved something remarkable. The girl who had been mocked and dismissed by her classmates had become one of the military's most capable and valuable officers. She had served her country in ways that few people could imagine, and she had proven that determination and intelligence could overcome any obstacle. But, perhaps most importantly, Sarah had found her true purpose. She wasn't just serving in the military, she was using her unique gifts to protect others and make a difference in the world. The work was dangerous and demanding, but it was also meaningful in ways that made all the sacrifices worthwhile. As she prepared for what would become her most memorable mission, a routine training exercise that would take her back to the place where her journey began, Sarah reflected on how far she had traveled from that scared 12-year-old girl walking into Jefferson Middle School. She had not only survived the mockery and rejection of her classmates, she had used their dismissal as fuel to achieve things they could never have imagined possible. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen received the assignment briefing on a crisp October morning at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. What appeared to be a routine training exercise would soon become one of the most personally significant moments of her military career. The mission was straightforward: demonstrate advanced helicopter capabilities and military career opportunities at high schools across Kentucky and Ohio as part of a recruitment and public relations initiative. Sarah had been selected for the assignment because of her unique combination of qualifications. As both an intelligence officer and an Apache pilot with multiple commendations, she represented the kind of success story the military wanted to showcase to young people considering military careers. The fact that she had overcome significant personal challenges to achieve her current position made her an even more compelling representative. The assignment coordinator, Major Lisa Rodriguez, explained the mission parameters during their initial meeting. "We're targeting schools in smaller communities where students might not have much exposure to military career opportunities," Major Rodriguez said. "Your job is to show them what's possible through military service, especially for students who might not think they fit the traditional military mold." Sarah nodded, understanding the assignment's importance. "What's the format for these presentations?" "You'll land the Apache in the school parking lot or nearby field, weather permitting. The visual impact is significant. Many of these students have never seen military aircraft up close. Then, you'll give a presentation about military careers, with emphasis on the educational opportunities and specialized training available." Major Rodriguez handed Sarah a list of scheduled schools. As she scanned the names, one entry made her heart skip a beat: Jefferson High School, Millfield, Ohio. The date was circled in red, October 15th, exactly 10 years after her high school graduation. Sarah stared at the name, memories flooding back with unexpected intensity. She could picture the hallways where she had walked alone, the cafeteria where she had eaten lunch in silence, the gymnasium where she would soon stand in military uniform addressing an assembly that would include some of the very people who had made her life miserable. "Is there a problem with any of these schools?" Major Rodriguez asked, noticing Sarah's reaction. Sarah quickly composed herself. "No problem. Jefferson High School is actually my alma mater. I graduated from there 10 years ago." Major Rodriguez smiled. "That's perfect. A hometown success story will make the presentation even more impactful. Local media will probably want to cover it too." Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah prepared for the assignment with unusual intensity. She researched each school on her list, developing presentations tailored to their specific demographics and needs. But she found herself spending extra time thinking about Jefferson High School and what she would say to an audience that might include her former classmates. Sarah decided to focus her presentation on the theme of opportunity and transformation. She would talk about how military service could open doors for young people regardless of their background or current circumstances. She would emphasize that success came from determination and hard work, not from family wealth or social status. The night before her departure, Sarah called her grandmother, who still lived in Millfield. "I'm coming home tomorrow," Sarah said. "For work. I'll be giving a presentation at the high school." Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. "After all these years, you're going back to that place. How do you feel about it?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Honestly? I'm not sure. Part of me is excited to show people what I've accomplished. But part of me wonders if it matters what they think." "It doesn't matter what they think," her grandmother said firmly. "But it might matter what you tell the young people who are sitting where you once sat, feeling like they don't belong." Her grandmother's words stayed with Sarah as she flew the Apache toward Ohio the next morning. The flight gave her time to think about her purpose in returning to Millfield. This wasn't about proving anything to her former tormentors, it was about showing current students that their circumstances didn't determine their destiny. As the familiar landscape of rural Ohio came into view, Sarah felt a strange mixture of emotions. The farms and small towns below looked exactly as she remembered them, but she was seeing them from a perspective she never could have imagined as a teenager. She was literally looking down on the place where she had once felt so small and insignificant. Jefferson High School appeared ahead, looking smaller than she remembered but otherwise unchanged. The parking lot was surrounded by fields, providing plenty of space for an Apache landing. Sarah could see students and faculty gathered at the windows, watching as she approached. Landing the Apache in the school parking lot created exactly the kind of spectacle the military had intended. The powerful helicopter settled onto the asphalt with precision, its rotor blades creating a windstorm that sent leaves and debris swirling across the lot. Students pressed against the windows, their faces filled with excitement and amazement. Sarah completed her post-flight checklist and prepared to shut down the aircraft. Through the cockpit windows, she could see a crowd gathering at a safe distance, held back by school security and local police who had been coordinated with in advance. Television news crews were setting up their equipment, clearly planning to cover this unusual visit to rural Ohio. As Sarah climbed out of the Apache, she was immediately struck by how different she felt from the last time she had been on this campus. 10 years ago, she had walked across the graduation stage feeling like an outsider who couldn't wait to escape. Now she was returning as a representative of one of the world's most powerful military forces, wearing the uniform of a lieutenant colonel and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who had proven herself in the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Principal Margaret Williams, who had been vice principal during Sarah's student years, approached with a group of faculty members and local officials. Principal Williams was one of the few people at the school who had always treated Sarah with kindness and respect. "Lieutenant Colonel Chen," Principal Williams said, extending her hand. "Welcome back to Jefferson High School. We're honored to have you here." Sarah shook the principal's hand, noting how strange it felt to be addressed by her military rank in the place where she had once been just another overlooked student. "Thank you for hosting me, Principal Williams. I'm looking forward to speaking with your students." As they walked toward the school building, Sarah noticed curious faces watching from every window. Word had obviously spread throughout the school that their visitor was a graduate who had achieved something extraordinary. Some faces looked familiar, though she couldn't place them specifically. Others were clearly current students, excited by the unusual break in their routine. The presentation was scheduled to take place in the gymnasium, the same space where Sarah had attended school assemblies as a student. As they entered the building, Sarah was struck by how familiar everything looked. The hallways, the lockers, even the smell of the building were exactly as she remembered them. "We've invited community members as well as students," Principal Williams explained as they walked. "This kind of visit is rare for our town, and there's a lot of interest." Sarah nodded, though she felt her heart rate increase slightly. Community members would likely include some of her former classmates, people who might remember the quiet girl they had mocked and dismissed. In the faculty lounge, Sarah was introduced to several teachers, including a few who had taught her 10 years earlier. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian who had been so kind to her, was still working at the school. "Sarah Chen," Mrs. Patterson said with genuine warmth. "I always knew you were destined for great things. You spent so many hours in my library, reading about the world beyond Millfield." "You were very kind to me during a difficult time," Sarah replied. "Your library was a refuge when I needed it most." Mr. Davidson, her former English teacher, approached with a smile. "I still have the essay you wrote about wanting to serve your country. I use it as an example of clear, purposeful writing. I never imagined you'd achieve quite this level of success." As the time for the presentation approached, Sarah felt the familiar calm that came over her before important missions. This was different from combat operations or intelligence briefings, but it was equally important in its own way. She had an opportunity to influence young people who might be struggling with the same feelings of powerlessness and alienation that she had experienced. The gymnasium was packed when Sarah entered. Students filled the bleachers, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and excitement. In the back rows, she could see adults who were clearly community members rather than students. Some faces looked familiar, though 10 years and military life had changed her perspective enough that she couldn't immediately identify specific individuals. Principal Williams introduced Sarah with a brief biography that highlighted her academic achievements as a student and her subsequent military career. The introduction mentioned her intelligence work and aviation qualifications without going into classified details. "Please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen, Jefferson High School class of 2014, back to share her experiences with us," Principal Williams concluded. Sarah approached the podium wearing her dress uniform with its array of ribbons and badges representing her various achievements and deployments. As she looked out at the audience, she felt a moment of profound reflection on the journey that had brought her to this point. "Thank you for that introduction," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the gymnasium's sound system. "It's strange to be back in this room where I sat as a student, looking at speakers and wondering what I would do with my life." She paused, making eye contact with students throughout the audience. 10 years ago, I graduated from this school without a clear plan for my future. I didn't have family connections or financial resources that would automatically open doors for me. What I did have was a belief that hard work and education could take me places I couldn't yet imagine." Sarah noticed that the students were paying attention in a way that suggested her words were resonating. In the back rows, some of the adult community members seemed surprised by her poise and confidence. "I want to talk to you today about opportunity and transformation," Sarah continued. "The military gave me chances that I never would have had otherwise. It paid for my education, taught me skills that I could never have learned anywhere else, and showed me that my background didn't determine my future." For the next 30 minutes, Sarah spoke about her military career without revealing classified information. She talked about language training, intelligence analysis, flight school, and deployments to challenging locations around the world. She emphasized the educational opportunities available through military service and the leadership training that prepared people for success in any field. But, more importantly, Sarah talked about transformation, about how military service had taught her that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. She spoke about the importance of perseverance, about learning from failure, and about the satisfaction that came from serving something greater than yourself. "The most important thing I learned," Sarah said as she concluded her prepared remarks, is that your circumstances don't define your potential. Where you come from matters less than where you're determined to go. The applause was enthusiastic, and Sarah could see that her message had connected with many of the students. During the question and answer session that followed, students asked thoughtful questions about military life, educational opportunities, and career paths. One question came from a student who looked familiar, a younger version of someone Sarah remembered from her own school years. "My older sister graduated with you," the student said. "She always said you were really smart but that you didn't have many friends. Did you feel like you didn't fit in here?" Sarah appreciated the directness of the question. "I did feel like an outsider during my time here," she answered honestly. "Sometimes that was painful, but it also motivated me to look for opportunities beyond what was immediately available in my environment." After the formal presentation, Sarah was approached by several students who wanted to know more about military careers. She spent time talking with them individually, providing information about different career paths and educational opportunities. As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah noticed a group of adults approaching. As they got closer, she recognized them as former classmates, people who had been part of the social circles that had excluded or mocked her during high school. Jessica Manning, now Jessica Thompson, based on her wedding ring, approached with what appeared to be genuine curiosity rather than hostility. "Sarah, that was an amazing presentation," Jessica said. "I have to admit, I'm impressed by what you've accomplished." Sarah nodded politely. "Thank you. Military service opened doors I never knew existed." Marcus Williams, who had grown significantly heavier and looked older than his years, joined the conversation. "I remember you from school. You were always reading and studying. I guess it paid off." The conversation was cordial but superficial. Sarah realized that these people had no real understanding of the journey she had traveled or the challenges she had overcome. To them, she was simply someone who had achieved an unusual level of success, worthy of curiosity but not necessarily respect or understanding. More meaningful was her conversation with several current students who stayed after to ask detailed questions about military careers. Sarah could see herself in some of them, bright young people who felt limited by their current circumstances and were looking for pathways to bigger opportunities. "I never thought someone from Millfield could do what you've done," one student said. "How do you know if you're ready for something like military service?" "You don't know if you're ready," Sarah replied honestly. "You just decide that you're willing to find out. The military will teach you everything you need to know, but you have to show up with the determination to learn." As the event concluded and Sarah prepared to return to her aircraft, she realized that the experience had been different from what she had expected. She hadn't felt the need to prove anything to her former classmates or to settle old scores. Instead, she had found satisfaction in potentially inspiring current students who might be facing the same challenges she had once experienced. The return flight to Fort Campbell gave Sarah time to reflect on the day's events. As she flew the Apache back across the Ohio countryside, she thought about the conversation with the students and the brief interactions with her former classmates. What struck her most was how little the opinions of her former tormentors mattered to her now. Their surprise at her success felt almost irrelevant compared to the possibility that she might have influenced a current student to consider opportunities they had never imagined. That evening, Sarah called her grandmother to tell her about the day. "How did it feel to go back?" her grandmother asked. "Different than I expected," Sarah replied. "I realized that I wasn't going back to prove anything to those people. I was going back to show current students that transformation is possible." Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. "That sounds like exactly the right reason to return." As Sarah prepared for sleep that night, she felt a sense of closure about her high school years that she hadn't realized she needed. The scared, mocked girl who had walked those hallways was gone, replaced by someone who had found her purpose and achieved her goals through determination and hard work. But, more importantly, Sarah understood that her story was about more than personal transformation. It was about the responsibility that came with success, the obligation to show others that their current circumstances didn't determine their future possibilities. The local television news coverage of Sarah's visit to Jefferson High School aired that evening throughout Ohio and neighboring states. The story of the hometown girl who had returned as a decorated military officer piloting an Apache helicopter captured public attention in ways that neither Sarah nor the military had anticipated. The news segment featured footage of the Apache landing in the school parking lot, interviews with amazed students, and clips from Sarah's presentation. The reporter emphasized the dramatic transformation from overlooked student to accomplished military officer, creating a narrative that resonated with viewers across the region. 10 years ago, Sarah Chen was just another graduating senior at Jefferson High School, the reporter narrated over footage of the school. Today, she returned as Lieutenant Colonel Chen, a decorated intelligence officer and Apache pilot who has served her country in some of the world's most challenging locations. The story was picked up by regional newspapers and, eventually, by national media outlets interested in feel-good stories about military service and personal transformation. Within a week, Sarah found herself receiving interview requests from reporters who wanted to explore her story in greater detail. More importantly, the presentation had its intended effect on the students at Jefferson High School. Principal Williams called Sarah a few days after her visit to report that the guidance office had been flooded with requests for information about military careers and service academy applications. "Several students have specifically mentioned your presentation as the reason for their interest," Principal Williams told Sarah during their phone conversation. "You've opened their eyes to possibilities they hadn't considered before." Among those inspired students was Amanda Rodriguez, a junior who had felt increasingly isolated and hopeless about her future prospects. Amanda came from a single-parent household, struggled financially, and had been convinced that college was beyond her reach. Sarah's story showed her that there were other pathways to education and career success. Amanda approached her guidance counselor the day after Sarah's presentation with questions about military service and educational opportunities. Within a month, she had contacted military recruiters and begun researching service academies and ROTC programs. "I never thought someone like me could achieve what Lieutenant Colonel Chen achieved," Amanda told her counselor. "But hearing her story made me realize that my circumstances don't have to determine my future." Amanda wasn't the only student affected by Sarah's visit. 3 other students initiated conversations with recruiters, and several more began researching military careers and educational opportunities. For Principal Williams and the faculty, the response confirmed their belief in the power of bringing successful graduates back to share their experiences. The impact extended beyond the immediate student body. Parents and community members who had attended the presentation began talking about the importance of supporting all students, regardless of their family background or social status. Some admitted that they had underestimated Sarah during her student years and acknowledged that their community needed to do better at recognizing and nurturing potential in all young people. Sarah's former classmate Marcus Williams was among those who reflected seriously on the encounter. The day after the presentation, he found himself thinking about his interactions with Sarah during high school and feeling uncomfortable about the way he and others had treated her. That weekend, Marcus drove to the cemetery where Sarah's parents were buried. He had never visited their graves before, but something about seeing Sarah's transformation made him want to pay his respects to the people who had given life to someone who had achieved so much. Standing at the modest headstones, Marcus found himself speaking aloud. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry we didn't see how special your daughter was. I'm sorry we made her life harder than it needed to be." The experience motivated Marcus to make changes in his own life. He began volunteering with local youth programs, particularly focusing on mentoring students who seemed isolated or struggled with confidence. It was his way of trying to make amends for his past behavior and ensure that other young people didn't experience the kind of treatment Sarah had endured. Jessica Thompson had a different reaction to Sarah's return. While she had been polite during their brief conversation, she struggled with feelings of resentment and inadequacy that she couldn't easily dismiss. Seeing Sarah's success forced Jessica to confront her own choices and the limitations she had accepted in her life. Jessica had married her high school boyfriend immediately after graduation and had settled into a routine that increasingly felt restrictive and unfulfilling. She worked part-time at a local business, raised 2 children, and lived the same kind of small-town life her parents had lived. There was nothing wrong with that choice, but Sarah's transformation highlighted possibilities that Jessica had never seriously considered. For weeks after the presentation, Jessica found herself researching continuing education programs and career opportunities. She eventually enrolled in online college courses with the goal of earning a business degree that would allow her to pursue more challenging and fulfilling work. The ripple effects of Sarah's visit extended even further when Amanda Rodriguez decided to write about the experience for the school newspaper. Her article, titled From Outcast to Officer, A Jefferson Graduate's Inspiring Journey, provided more details about Sarah's high school experiences and her subsequent achievements. The article was honest about the challenges Sarah had faced as a student, including the social isolation and financial struggles that had marked her teenage years. Amanda interviewed several teachers who remembered Sarah and included their reflections on her potential and determination. Sarah was one of those students who could have easily fallen through the cracks. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, was quoted in the article. She faced significant challenges, but she never let those challenges define her limitations. She used education as her pathway to a better future. The article caught the attention of regional education officials who were working on initiatives to better support students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Sarah's story became a case study in the importance of recognizing and nurturing potential in all students, regardless of their family circumstances. 6 months after her visit to Jefferson High School, Sarah received an unexpected letter from Amanda Rodriguez. The student wrote to inform Sarah that she had been accepted to West Point Military Academy with a full scholarship, and that Sarah's presentation had been the inspiration for her application. "I want to serve my country the way you have," Amanda wrote. "I want to prove that students from small towns and difficult circumstances can achieve extraordinary things. Thank you for showing me that transformation is possible." Sarah kept Amanda's letter in her desk drawer and found herself reading it whenever she faced particularly challenging days in her military career. The knowledge that her story had directly influenced a young person's life choices gave her work additional meaning and purpose. The success of the Jefferson High School presentation led to more speaking opportunities for Sarah. The military began including her in recruitment and public relations campaigns specifically designed to reach underrepresented communities and students who might not otherwise consider military service. Over the next 2 years, Sarah spoke at dozens of schools across the country, always emphasizing the themes of opportunity, transformation, and perseverance. Her message resonated particularly strongly with students who came from challenging backgrounds similar to her own. But perhaps the most meaningful speaking engagement came when Sarah was invited to address a conference of guidance counselors and educators focused on supporting at-risk students. Her presentation, titled Recognizing Hidden Potential, challenged educators to look beyond students' current circumstances and see their possibilities for growth and achievement. "Some of your most promising students might be the ones sitting quietly in the back of the classroom," Sarah told the audience of educators. "They might be the ones who can't afford the latest clothes or participate in expensive activities. Don't let their circumstances blind you to their potential." Sarah shared research showing that students from disadvantaged backgrounds often possessed resilience, determination, and problem-solving skills that served them well in challenging careers like military service. She encouraged educators to actively identify and support these students rather than allowing them to remain invisible. The presentation led to the development of new programs in several school districts focused on identifying and mentoring students who showed academic potential but lacked social or economic advantages. These programs provided additional support, mentorship, and information about educational and career opportunities that students might not otherwise discover. 3 years after her visit to Jefferson High School, Sarah received news that brought her journey full circle. Amanda Rodriguez had completed her first year at West Point and was excelling in her studies and military training. More significantly, Amanda had started a mentorship program at her high school to work with current students who faced challenges similar to those she had overcome. The program, called Pathways to Possibility, connected successful graduates with current students who needed encouragement and guidance. Amanda had specifically requested that Sarah serve as the program's honorary chairperson and primary speaker at its inaugural event. Sarah accepted the invitation eagerly, recognizing that the program represented exactly the kind of support she wished had been available during her own high school years. The event would take place in the Jefferson High School gymnasium, the same space where she had delivered her first presentation 3 years earlier. When Sarah returned to Millfield for the Pathways to Possibility launch, she found a community that had changed in subtle but significant ways. The conversation about recognizing and supporting all students had evolved into concrete programs and initiatives. Teachers had received training on identifying and nurturing potential in students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The launch event drew an even larger crowd than Sarah's original presentation had attracted. Students, parents, teachers, and community members filled the gymnasium to hear about the new mentorship program and to listen to Sarah speak about the importance of supporting young people's dreams regardless of their circumstances. 3 years ago, I stood in this room and talked about transformation and opportunity, Sarah began her remarks. Today, I'm here to celebrate a program that will provide the kind of support and encouragement that every student deserves. Sarah spoke about her own journey, but she focused primarily on the responsibility that successful people have to help others who are following similar paths. She talked about Amanda's achievements and the courage it had taken for a high school student to apply to West Point from a small town in Ohio. Success isn't just about what you achieve for yourself, Sarah told the audience. It's about what you do to create opportunities for others. This program represents the best kind of legacy, one that ensures that future students won't have to navigate their challenges alone. After her formal remarks, Sarah participated in small group discussions with current students who were interested in the mentorship program. Many of their stories reminded her of her own experiences, bright young people who felt limited by their circumstances and weren't sure how to pursue their dreams. One conversation particularly moved her. A sophomore named David Martinez told Sarah about his family's financial struggles and his fear that college was beyond his reach. He was interested in engineering but didn't know anyone who had pursued that career path. "I want to design things that help people," David said. "But I don't know if someone like me can really do that." Sarah spent 20 minutes talking with David about educational opportunities, scholarship programs, and career paths in engineering. She gave him contact information for several programs and encouraged him to stay in touch with her as he explored his options. "Your background doesn't disqualify you from anything," Sarah told David. "It might actually give you perspectives that make you a better engineer. Don't let anyone convince you that your dreams are too big." As the event concluded, Sarah realized that her journey had come full circle in the most meaningful way possible. She had returned to the place where she had once felt powerless and voiceless, and she was now using her success to amplify the voices of students who needed to know that their circumstances didn't determine their destiny. The drive to visit her grandmother's grave, she had passed away peacefully the year before, gave Sarah time to reflect on everything that had happened since her first return to Millfield. Standing at the modest headstone, she spoke quietly about Amanda's success, the mentorship program, and the students she had met who reminded her of her younger self. "You were right," she said to her grandmother's memory. "This was never about proving anything to the people who doubted me. It was about showing others that transformation is possible." As Sarah prepared to leave Millfield for what she knew would probably be the last time, she thought about the legacy she was building. Her military career had been successful by any measure, but her greatest achievement might be the ripple effect of inspiration that had started with one presentation in a high school gymnasium. Amanda Rodriguez would graduate from West Point and serve her country with distinction. David Martinez would receive a full scholarship to study engineering and would eventually design medical devices that would help thousands of people. Dozens of other students who had been influenced by Sarah's story or the programs it inspired would go on to achieve things they had never thought possible. The girl who had once sat alone in the Jefferson High School cafeteria had become more than just a successful military officer. She had become a catalyst for change, proving that one person's transformation could inspire an entire community to expand its definition of what was possible. Sarah's story would continue to be told at Jefferson High School for years to come, not as a tale of personal triumph over adversity, but as an example of how success carried with it the responsibility to lift others up. The scared, mocked outcast had become a beacon of hope for future generations of students who needed to believe that their dreams were achievable. As Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen flew away from Millfield for the final time, she carried with her the satisfaction of knowing that her greatest victory wasn't the rank on her uniform or the aircraft she piloted. It was the knowledge that she had used her success to create opportunities for others, ensuring that future students would never have to face their challenges alone. The Apache helicopter disappeared into the Ohio sky, but the legacy of transformation it represented would continue to inspire and empower young people for generations to come. The Outcast had not just succeeded, she had changed the very definition of what success meant by ensuring that others could follow in her path.